Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heater. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I am here today with another guest. Kirsten Zeigler is a people and culture expert on a mission to reshape the role of human resources so that small business owners can focus on growing their business. She collaborates with leaders to ensure compliance and help build an inclusive and productive culture that attracts and retains talent. She brings energy, empathy, and ethics to everything she does. Welcome to Big Brave Business, Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's so nice to be here.
So this is fun because on this podcast, I have talked about quite a bit about the networking experiment that I did in the fall where I met like a whole bunch of people in a really short period of time. And I talked about some things went well and some things didn't aspects of it. Kirsten's one of the things that went well. So that's how we met. And then she's been featured on our YouTube channel. And yeah, I knew when I was going to be bringing in guests for season 2, I definitely wanted to have you on. So I'm so excited you're here.
You're going to make me blush. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and I always love talking to you. So this is the highlight of my week.
Yeah. So I'm so interested to talk about HR and for a lot of reasons. So I want to go ahead and say that initially this podcast was really geared specifically toward entrepreneurs. So I know and especially service providers. So I know we have some entrepreneurs and service providers who are listening, but I also know that even though that's the main thing that we talked about before, there were some people who are in more traditional like business leadership roles who were listening. So I think we have a good mix. And I think it's been interesting in season 2 to try to talk about both just in general being a leader in business. And so I think this concept of HR is interesting on both sides, and definitely for people who are working in a more traditional work environment, they probably have an HR department, or sometimes they probably wish they had one if they're in a small enough company that there isn't one. And for those of us who are building our own businesses from the ground up, I think there's like just a lot of questions about what role does HR play, and at what point does HR play a role? This might be a stupid question, but what is HR?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think the simplest way to say it is that HR deals with anything people related. So that could be specifically like tough conversations. It could be career growth. It could be hiring. It could be compliance, but related to your team and population, right? There's different types of compliance. There's different types of policies and rules and regulation, but HR deals with anything that touches people. And I don't mean that in a problematic way. I meant that in an all-around way. So that's like the simplest way, I think. But from there, if you really want to get granular, there's so many different buckets of HR. So like I said, the compliance side, the performance management side, there's diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's payroll, it just like benefits, it goes on forever.
So if you have a team, then HR is relevant, period. Is that true?
Absolutely. And I always say that even if you're a solopreneur and you are thinking about hiring your first employee, HR is relevant.
And how about if the only people that you really have on your quote unquote team are like 1099 service providers? Like maybe they don't work directly for your company, but they have a bunch of clients like VAs, and I'm a podcast manager for people. Some people consider me quote unquote part of their team, which is really a nice honor, but also like I run my own business.
Absolutely. I think that with contractors, it can become a little tricky, right? Because sometimes you classify people as contractors that maybe actually shouldn't be classified as contractors. So in those types of situations, if you have a team of just contractors, I don't think you need an HR person on board regularly, but I think it's important to have that like touch point or just have one in your network that maybe you can pay attention to the content they're putting out, or I offer 90-minute intensives for those types of situations. So it's just a one-off, basically. Do you have questions? Let's talk it through. because you want to make sure those people are classified correctly. But you can also create like a nice environment and a nice culture for your contractors to work too. It doesn't have to be just reserved for W-2 employees.
So yeah, that would be nice. It's interesting too to take that angle, because my next kind of train of thought or discussion point is like, HR to me, and maybe this is like revealing a little bit of my own personal experience, but HR to me feels a little bit of a battleground. Like my association with HR, and I think a lot of people could relate to this, is that you go to HR when you have a problem, and or HR is a place where you like report stuff, or if you get called into HR, it's because you're in trouble for something. And I've thankfully never had to really report anything or been reported for anything, but I definitely had this feeling about HR in my like corporate experience as being like the principal's office.
And so there's been times, so a little background on myself, I was in corporate for about, I would say a little over 10 years and then went out on my own. Right now I support small businesses who don't have HR people. They're not big enough. And so I have that experience with both. And so being in HR and corporate, I felt like people thought I was their mom. I had one company where they would literally call me mom, and I'm like, please don't do that. I just want regular work friends like the rest of us. Or I was the cops, right? HR can be extremely lonely. First of all, I just want to say we are people too. We want coworkers and we want camaraderie and peers and teams. And by being like having this authoritative bad guy stigma, it can be really lonely. And there's so many studies out there that like HR professionals are some of the most like unhappy people in their careers. And so I part of the reason why I went out on my own is because I wanted to work for people that wanted me around. Which is, I know it's sad to say, but it's true. And so I understand why we have this stigma. Like I get it from all angles. I think that a lot of the times in corporate, we are stuck in really challenging positions, right? Because you have to think about it. HR is not usually the ones making decisions. We are the facilitators, right? We are providing facts and information that we are finding to whomever is above us, and those are the decision makers. So then we are the vessel for giving that feedback. A lot of times it can be negative feedback, but half the time it should be good feedback. I think that's where it's really traditional HR really misses the mark on that. And the kind of work that I like to do, and I would say in the HR community, it's more like progressive HR, is you want to work on some positive stuff. Like we want to work on positive stuff too. We want to build your teams and build the culture and help support your employees in their career trajectories, right? So if you're thinking about small businesses too, you probably don't have that old school traditional, okay, I'm a coordinator, now I'm a senior coordinator, now I'm a manager, now I'm like, you don't have that traditional career path. So what does that mean for you? How do you continue to learn, be inspired, grow? Because that's the only reason you're going to stay with a company. So when you get to do from an HR perspective, even I think that stuff is so much more fun. Of course, problems happen, and we're there to help guide and support leaders and businesses through those tough times, but we're also there for the good times too. And who facilitates your benefits? It's usually HR. So I'm on a campaign now. Like, don't hate us.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think this perception of HR, when I came into the workforce, like a typical 9 to 5 work experience, when I came into the workforce, my impression of HR was like, if you're having an issue or if you need help or if you need support, you go to HR. They're like the ones who will have the answers and the resources and the support to like help you navigate being part of this company, whatever it is. And then the longer that I was there, and also the more I engaged with anti-corporate culture things online and I don't know, getting corporate woke or whatever, then I started really changing my perspective to hear a lot of, because I was influenced by a lot of people who were talking about HR as actually HR is not working in your favor. If you go to HR, you're essentially like telling on yourself, and HR is there to protect the company. HR is there to protect the leadership. HR is not there to protect you. So if you go in and you go start something with HR and you go put it like in your file or something, like that's actually working to the company's benefit, not to your benefit. And their whole role is to make sure the company is protected, protecting the company from lawsuits, protecting the company from like any kind of fines or sticky situations or scandals or whatever. That's their whole role, is to protect that company, and they're the enemy. And that kind of perception, not that HR is the enemy, but the company is the enemy and HR is defending the
Yes.
enemy, kind of a thing. I'm just curious about, and yes, also when you said HR is so lonely, I'm thinking, yeah, of course it is. Shoot, if that's what the discourse is around it, it's got to be lonely. Nobody wants to invite you to lunch.
No, and also you feel weird about, if you're in a culture like that too, you feel weird about going to lunch, even if you are invited, because you're made to feel as a lonely HR person that you can't connect with the people, right? And so
Yeah.
there are companies like that really do HR a disservice, I think. And I also think it's part of this older way of practicing HR and thinking about HR. I have always been told in my training in the past that we should be the balance between the business and the employee needs. Like we need to be that like middle ground, truth tellers, and balance it out. I feel pretty strongly about that, right? Because you want to protect a business, but you want to protect the people because the people are the business. So you can't have one without the other, but you also can't have a business employing people if they're dealing with like lawsuits or hefty fines. You know what I mean? So it's this whole circular protection that's happening. I truly find that the thing that leads to the most issues in any company is like lack of communication. So if an employee feels a way, whether it's good or bad about something, by communicating it, I see it less as tattling and more as, great, how can we find a solution? And the sooner someone speaks up about something, the easier it is to fix and the easier it is to turn around. So I like to try to create relationships with people and safe spaces, right? I don't flag something unless the person that's coming to me says, I need this to be fixed. So I can't fix anything unless I move that information through the company or escalate or talk to the manager or whatever, right? But I always let people know that first. Or if it's like something really horrible that happened, right? And then it would be illegal not being. So
like a
there's
mandated reporting type of situation.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there are some circumstances, but we as HR people, I'm speaking for all HR people. I know we're not all alike, right? I feel it's my duty to speak for my profession. We sometimes end up in tight situations because we have this knowledge of what can go wrong and of what needs to happen, but we also want to be flexible because there is no black and white in any situation. Long way of saying, I totally get where you're coming from and feeling that way, because I think that in a lot of these outdated companies, that's the vibe for sure. And I think that HR is put in that situation where they then have to act like that too. I don't love that. I don't want to work at a company like that. I don't want to be, I've been that person. I don't want to be that person. But it's hard if you're just like an HR manager, an HR director, you're not like part of the C-suite or the executive team. You can't change that.
And that really just comes around in general to my big mantra around here in Big Brave Business, which is stop spending time in places that make you feel like shit and with people who make you feel like shit. And if your job is doing that to you, like, get a different one.
Get out.
That sounds like such simple advice. And I understand it is not that easy, that job searching sucks, and that your family's dependent on your income, and that keeping a roof over your kids' heads matters. And that I understand it is so much more layered then just get another job. I get it. And also,
Totally.
I know from my own experience, this feeling of, are all jobs going to be, it's like when you're in a really terrible relationship and you think, and I'm speaking heteronormativity here, but like for when you're in a really terrible relationship with one man and you're like, but are all men like that?
All men trash. Yeah.
I don't know. Is there any point in leaving this relationship? Because is there any man out there that is actually going to be worth any more than this one?
But think about it. It is a bad relationship. Like when you work at a place that you are very unhappy, it's a bad relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different form of a relationship. It's culture is a really big thing, but when I always I did this for myself, I tell other people this, friends, family, like when you're looking for a job, you need to come up with your must-haves, right? Is culture number 1 for you? Is it number 5? Like you may not get all of those things. So to me, it became to a point where I was like, I don't care about like the status or the commute. Like I care about like the culture and feeling good about where I am and what I'm doing. And you just have to think about at the moment, those could change, right? Back in the day, I was like, money is the most important, right? Growing my career is most important. Now I'm like, no, I want to work for people that actually like their teams and like their people, want to change things and want my help and advice. I also find that a lot of places don't want HR's help or advice. They're just checking a box. So again, why do you think we're so unhappy? Like it's lose-lose. The employees hate us. The executives don't want to listen to us.
Yeah, that's a tough job. Okay, so I had another thing and now I forget because I was just thinking about what you said.
Wait, let me just defend one more thing here too. We hear a lot of heavy things.
Yeah.
Like we deal with a lot of heavy situations. I've had one of my corporate jobs that I worked at, we had 2 employees pass away during the time I was there. And it's putting their life insurance claims in place immediately after it happens. Like that feels terrible and gross, right? Or dealing with people's leave of absences for really horrible, challenging situations and having to talk through it with them too. I'm not a fan of just being like, oh, you have this terrible thing going on. Great. Give me the information. I'll check it off. I'm like, no, talk to me. How are you doing? What kind of support do you need? And we deal in the negative a lot and it's not fun sometimes.
Yeah. No, I can really appreciate that. And it's interesting. There's a job I had many years ago, and I will be vague about it so that it doesn't point to anyone specifically, but there was a particular HR person. They were not the only HR person, but they were the primary HR person. And they ended up leaving the company while I was there. And it was a bit mysterious and vague, but it was not good. And I had felt like this person was progressively unhappier and unhappier. And I don't know, it could have been something unrelated to work, but listening to what you're saying and thinking about what was going on in that company at that time, and I just think, yeah, I bet that was a terrible job, actually. I bet that was really lonely. And I think that when you're unhappy at work and there is an HR department, if something's going on for someone at work and they're really struggling, there's someone in their life who's telling them go to HR and talk to them about it. But if you are HR, then
you have no one.
Who's your outlet?
You seriously have no one. You have to go find a therapist.
Get a therapist. That's good advice anyway.
Yeah. I mean, everyone should find a therapist, but HR specifically.
So I'm interested too in your 90-minute consultations that you talked about, because I do think that there's a lot of situations when you do leave that horrible job and then you're building your own thing. And I'm surprised at the HR conversations that I could have / should have been having for the past couple of years, that now that I have a couple of friends like you who are in HR, that I'm like, oh man, I think I'm a little behind the 8 ball on talking about these things and considering these things. But I didn't know that I needed HR support. So one of the things that you specifically said is like, oh, just to answer any questions you have. What if you don't even know what questions you have? When should someone who is building their own business schedule a 90-minute session with someone like you, or specifically you? And what kind of stuff, if they don't know what to talk about, what would be beneficial?
Great question. I just want to say, first of all, everyone starts somewhere, right? When you start your own business, you do what you think needs to be done. You put together everything you can. You operate the best you can. So like when people come to me, whether it's been 6 months of them doing their own thing or 6 years, I am never judgmental about what you have already put in place, what you haven't put in place. It's okay. And also, like, you're in the same boat as so many other people. So you haven't done anything wrong. I feel like there's sometimes a lot of guilt when people come to me and they're like, I don't have that, I didn't. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, we're having the conversation now. You're fine. Like, everything's fine. So I think that, again, if you have a team of contractors, it can't hurt to talk, right? For people who have teams of contractors and they're happy with the way it's going, they don't want to convert anyone to like part-time or full-time employees, I don't think we really need to talk unless you're having issues, right? Let's say you aren't sure of how you can tell your contractor to do work, or what guidelines need to be in place to put for your contractors. But when you start to think about hiring someone on to payroll, I love to get people then. Like, I love to just have one conversation then. Whether we continue working together after that, totally up to the person and their needs. But, you know, the 90-minute intensive, I think for someone that's just thinking about hiring, we talk about, do you have a job description? We start there, right? Job descriptions sound really scary. They don't have to be. Your business is unique to you, right? You started something because you wanted to build this. You have a passion for something. So your first job may be totally wacky, right? And you may not be able to look up a template on the internet because it may be so unique to your business. That's fine. Maybe the title's weird. Great. Make it as unique as possible, right? So I help people walk through what that looks like and build out that job description, and then talk about maybe they have someone they want to convert to an employee. Maybe they want to go out and look for one. So we talk about what the plan is for that. And then I always recommend an employee handbook off the bat from the minute you hire your first employee, just so you have all of your like policies and processes built out. That's something, a service I offer. And I really like to work with the business owner to determine how they want these things to go, right? Do you want a 90-day training period where you check in at your 30, 60, 90, and it's all about progress? What kind of policies do you want in place? You can always add. People are always so nervous about, I have to offer all of this and that. And no, you could start with the basics and then we can build as the years go on as you're more comfortable. I think a lot of times too, some compliance stuff is pretty important to talk about early on. And I ask a lot of questions. It's okay if someone doesn't have anything to come to me with. They're just like, I feel like I need to check these things off. What do I need to know? I'm more than happy for talking for the full 90 minutes, but there's a lot of state specific laws. I feel a lot of people are very aware of the federal regulations and federal laws, but a lot of federal regulations and laws may not apply to small businesses, but also your state matters, your town sometimes matters. It gets real tricky. I'm in New Jersey. We don't have pay transparency laws yet statewide, but Jersey City has them. So it's, if you're a business in Jersey City, you got to put the pay range in. So it's very intricate. So making sure you're doing things correctly with that, specifically paid sick leave. A lot of states have paid sick leave. And I've seen some companies get in trouble for not offering that to their employees. And usually it's because employees will file a complaint. On that, employee documents like I-9s and stuff, I see a lot of people doing those wrong. So I help walk people through how to do it correctly and how to fix anything that you've done wrong. And then hiring practices, I always think are really important too, what you can and can't ask. there's so many ways that you may be delivering like unconscious bias. And so just how to pay attention to that, because that's something also that I've seen get flagged by prospective candidates on things like Glassdoor. So you just want to make sure your interview process is super tight. It's not, you can do it. It's not a lot. It's not overwhelming. It's totally possible. You just need to be aware. I know that was a lot. I'm like,
no, I think it's really helpful actually. And of course, I'm thinking about my own business, and I'm
yeah.
working.
Do you have any HR questions that you talk it through a real time? Like, what
Yeah.
scares you?
I think, okay, so one big thing that scares me is, to your point about a lot of different area laws, is
Yeah.
having team members in multiple locations. And
Yes.
that feels really stressful, overwhelming, and expensive to me. And at the same time, I know that's the right direction for my company. So I don't know, I guess that's like something that's come up for me that feels like it just
Yeah.
makes me wanna throw up.
I totally understand. There are a lot of I would say the things to pay attention to, specifically if people on your team live in a bunch of different states and they're on payroll, pay attention to what sick time looks like for that state. I would pay attention to what's like, you need to know if it rolls over, how much they accrue, if they have it in general, overtime, because sometimes overtime laws are different. California has different overtime laws than New York does. So paying attention to that, paying attention to final pay if you let someone go is really important, because some states require it within 24 hours. Some you
Mm.
could do it just in the next pay cycle. So there's a few different things that I just like to flag with people. Like, you don't need to be on top of this at all time, but should this situation arise, go look it up, right? Like, you just need to know what to pay attention to. You don't have to have it memorized, but know when to go look something up.
Yeah. Do you offer anything like, so the 90-minute one-off thing I think is super helpful, because then it's just you can ease people's minds when they're stressed about something, or help them, give them like a plan of action. Like, here's the steps that I need to take now. And that's cool. And I really think that's an awesome thing. Do you have anything like a retainer type of situation where, hey, just when I have a question, can I come to you?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So I offer monthly consulting services. And so the way I structure it is it's a minimum of 2 hours per month, which I started doing because it really forces the business owners to have a recurring one-on-one with me monthly. So I can hold you accountable to your HR questions, needs, and then the additional time in that 2 hours is usually spent on action items. So whether it's like providing information, templates, research, etc. Sometimes people use more than those 2 hours, but I find it's really beneficial just to have that space, right? Because I have so many people that come to me and say, I have nothing this month. And then we get to talking, and it's this whole thing that they had no idea that they even needed to talk about. I like creating the space for them to just put their HR hat on and allow them that time.
Mm-hmm. I could really see that being true, because I think that for me, what I'm realizing, and I've said this, I may have said it on this podcast, but I've definitely been saying it a lot lately, which is that, so I'm now in year 5 of my business, which is really
Oh
exciting.
my
But I
God,
feel like,
congratulations!
thank you. But I feel like 5 years in, I thought that this would look like a crown on top of the past 5 years. And instead, it looks like, nope, the first 5 years is like a chapter. And now this year is really about like laying the groundwork and the foundation for the next 5 years. And it's just a whole bigger conversation about how to do business. Like, when you're talking about starting a business, that's one thing. And now I'm not having conversations about starting a business. I'm having conversations about growing and running a business, right? And that is exciting, but it's also, what I'm discovering is that any stone I pick up, there's a lot of
Oh,
bugs under there. And it's, oh
yep.
no, like, oh. So every time, the more people that I meet who have like different specializations, I start to pick up a stone. I'm like, oh boy, there's a lot under there to deal with. There's a lot of
It's like an
just,
old house.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things to be working on. And I think what's exciting about being in this phase of business is, first of all, it feels so much more real. Like, it feels so much
Yeah.
more like being a CEO than like being a service provider. And even though I am a service provider and I do a lot of client work, but like I am definitely also, and people talk about working on your business versus working in your business. But I think, again, when you're starting a business, that looks like, I need a logo and I need a web page and what's my social media strategy? And I think like that stuff matters. I'm not trying to downplay that. I think getting started is it's so fun. Starting a business is so
Yeah.
fun. So there's a lot to it that you're working on. I get to be creative and get out my artist paintbrush and what do I want this business to be?
But it's all like the outward stuff.
Yeah. But then I feel like when you get to working on your business versus working in your business at circa the 5-year mark, then it looks like, okay, what are my HR processes? What are my sales processes? What are my what are my, and SOPs are a thing I guess you can do earlier, that you can do that all along, but SOPs look really different at 5 years than they do at 18 months. Like there's just so many more things. And you realize how much of the company literally just lives in your head at this point, and that's not scalable. So then there's just like a lot of things to build. So yeah, that's where I feel like I am right now, and I am enjoying the heck out of it, but I'm also like, I think I'm a bit overwhelmed at not just having a to-do list. I actually love that, but I'm a bit overwhelmed at the sheer number of hours I'm working. I can't not pretend that's not true, but also it's expensive, because then I feel like, okay, the best thing for me to do here is, like, my company is still small enough that with something like HR, yeah, I could probably just do a 90-minute consult with you, have an action plan, and do it myself, which I've been a very DIY business person up until this point. But because every expert that I talk to in different areas, I feel like, oh, I could probably just do it. I'm one person. Actually, what I need is I need help from somebody who's an expert at this, and that's a lot of people to pay.
Totally. And just like with anything, like you said, you like lists or to-do lists, so do I. Just prioritize them. Get it out of your head, put them into buckets, and be like, okay, I don't know, numbers, and be like, great, finance, that's bucket 1, and then start to number them, and your priorities can change too. That's totally fine. But don't try to think you have to get everything at once. That's not doable.
Correct. Yeah. I think what I've been saying is that, so 2024 for me is building systems and people and structures in place so that in 2025, I can step back from doing so much client work. And I'm still going to have client facing stuff. But if 2024 can be about like trying to have one foot in both pools, then that means 2025 can look more like CEO hat most of the time.
And I love that.
That's a stressful gap year for me. Okay, all right, we're doing it, but I know it's temporary and I know it's for the greater good of the trajectory that I'm on. So yeah, so that's where I'm at right now.
One of the things that I should have mentioned earlier, because honestly, it's one of my absolute favorite things to do, is help leaders become their own authentic leader. So for you talking about put your CEO hat on, that's a great time to engage, because I'll walk you through how to be a leader, how to delegate to your team, right? Like how to have tough conversations, positive conversations, feedback, how to communicate with them. And so that's a big part of what my business does. And honestly, it's my favorite thing to do.
I'm curious, and I want to try to talk about it, but I wonder if we would end up wanting to do like a part 2 just about this whole topic. But I want to ask you about this, because you mentioned building culture as like a big part of it. So I think like compliance is such a big part of this, and that I feel like has been more, that's where my brain is about what I need. So I think that's more what I've been focused on in this conversation so far. But I also think part of my corporate experience included being like culture and morale person. And so I feel like that is a conversation I really want to have, especially because we specifically touched on this idea that you can be creating a team culture even if your team is 1099 independent contractors. And especially if you're building like a W-2 team, then I think that is interesting to think about what does culture building look like? What does a good culture look like? And for you, what would you look for in a culture? I don't know. This might just be too big of a conversation, but I want to try to touch on it. If we need to do a part 2, we'll do it.
Yeah, I think that this is a huge convo, and I'd love to talk about it in depth for hours and hours. But I think that as a business owner and a leader, I think you need to understand what values are important to you first, just so you know, right? And then you need to think about how you want that to reflect in your business. People talk about mission, vision, values. I think those are such a good place to start. Like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Like, why did I start my own business? I'm a team of one, but if I were to have a team, I love women and female empowerment and equity, and like that to me is something I am passionate about and would want to run through my culture. That looks like hiring people that believe in that, right? They don't have to be loud about it, but they have to be on board with the belief of it. Maybe it's spending time volunteering together somewhere, right? Like maybe it's ways, if you're remote, maybe you find organizations that are similar, like across the country, and just do it at the same time, right? There's different ways to just create something that's important to you and make people feel a part of it. And I also think it's about treating your employees well. And it doesn't always have to be, yes, fair pay, like you want to pay people what they're worth, but if you're a small business owner specifically, you may not be able to pay tons and tons of money. What are some other benefits you could provide? Is it a flexible work schedule? Is family a really important thing to you? Maybe you give flexible work hours around school schedules, or there's just so many different things you could do to help create the culture you want.
Yeah. I think for me, and yeah, I definitely want to have you back and do this. I was just like reflecting on like the overall themes of this conversation. So we're definitely going to do a part 2. Kirsten's coming back. We're going to talk about culture, but I want to just share sort of my perspective on this, and then we'll wrap up, which is that I think for me, what that has looked like so far is having a really solid core values part of my brand. Like when I developed the Podfox brand and we did things like the logo and the colors and all that kind of stuff, fonts and whatever, one of the things that we really did was looked at a core value list. And I think that when I make any decisions or we make decisions as a team, it's always coming back to those core values, and it's always making sure that those core values are like woven into the way we do things. And that exact core value set isn't necessarily a fit for everybody. That's not everybody's priorities. Like you said, what are you looking for in a culture? But I think that if what you're looking for in a culture is these core values, then like the way we keep that integrated steeped in our culture is that we make decisions based on those core values, right? Like it always has to come back to that. And so I think for me, that's like how I try to lead.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And you have to be true to yourself, though. That's the other part of it that I see like explode in a fiery mess when people say, I want this culture of open communication and learning and knowledge and ideas, and they actually don't want that. They're like, no, I want to make the decisions and have it trickle down. And so you actually have to believe in what you're saying you believe in. That is my biggest piece of advice. And if you want to create a culture that is more of a top-down approach, fine. You'll find people that thrive in that kind of environment, that don't have to make decisions on their own, that like following direction. That's okay, but just make sure it is authentic. I think authenticity is the biggest part of that. You cannot fake culture. I'm going to end it on that note.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And of course, anybody who's listening who does not already have an HR consultant that they're working with, if you've never talked to an HR consultant about your business and you run one, then you definitely want to at least do a 90-minute session with Kirsten so that you can just figure out what what your plan of action is for the next however many months or however many years. Like, what direction are you going? What things do you need to know that you might not already know? So we're definitely going to make sure that Kirsten's information is all linked in the show notes, that you can definitely get that booked. And then if you're like me, you're going to be putting her on retainer, because that's definitely my plan. And of course she'll be back, so we're going to remind you, so that if you didn't do it, you'll be reminded soon. So I like to end all of these conversations with this question, which can be work related, but it doesn't have to be. And that is, what is making you happy right now?
Ooh, what is making me happy right now? The upcoming 3-day week or 4-day weekend,
Yeah.
3.5, 4. It depends on how tomorrow morning goes. I'm looking forward to just like a tiny break. I'm going to get my backyard together. I'm going to finish a bunch of projects. I'm going to spend time with my animals. I'm very excited. That is giving me life. And I'm also on the East Coast. Like, we hit summer this week. It
Yeah.
is in the 80s. It is beautiful. So that is psyching me up. How about you?
It's so funny. I've been hearing so many people talk about, what's making me happy is the weather. And being in Arizona, it's like the total opposite. This is the worst time. We're like, it's 100 degrees. Like, our air conditioning units are working full time. We're like, no, this is the worst time. So that's definitely not mine. I think I don't want to use this prematurely because it hasn't actually happened yet. But one thing that's making me happy is that I am going to get a new car. So people will have opinions about this,
Ooh!
but I lease my vehicles because I will never be a person who will drive a vehicle into the ground. I don't want that. I don't want the maintenance and the upkeep. I don't mind that I will have a car payment forever. I would have a car payment forever anyways, because I would be trading my car in to get something new.
Right.
That's what I love. I love to have new things. I also get a new phone every year. Go ahead and judge me. It's fine. So anyways,
Wait, are you going to share what you're getting?
I don't know yet, but my lease
Okay.
is up. This is my third CRV in a row, which is really funny. But I will reiterate, first of all, I do love CRVs, but I want an updated one that does not have any massive maintenance. Okay, so that is like a big part of it. Yes, I have had 3 CRVs in a row. It is possible that I will do another CRV, but if I do, what I really want to do is step up and do like a luxury CRV, like get all the things. But I'm intrigued because since my last lease, they brought the Passport back, which is like a step in between the CRV and the Pilot. So the Pilot has an extra row of seats. If you're not like a Honda girl, it has the extra row of seats, which used to be my dream car, which it's basically just a CRV with an extra row of seats. But I did not get it because of the difference in payment. And now none of my kids live at home anymore. And I no longer have like a currently active Girl Scout troop at the moment. So there's literally no reason for me to have an extra row of seats. I don't have dogs. I don't have like none of this applies. So there is
Are
no
you getting
reason for
like a
me to have a
sports
Pilot.
car now instead?
No, I still like a really big vehicle. That's really fun to me. So I'm interested in the Passport because it's the same amount of seating as a CRV, but it's bigger. So I'm intrigued to see if it feels different and just like something to switch up. So I don't know. I'm going to check it out. And of course, I've
I
always
think
wanted a
that's
Pilot.
exciting.
So could be a
That's
Pilot.
exciting.
Yeah.
I just leased my first car. Like, I've always bought like used cars.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just leased my first car earlier this
It's
year, and
fun.
I feel so fancy. Like, I had a really hard time that first month being like, oh, like imposter syndrome. I'm like, what am I doing? I don't deserve this. And now I'm just like,
Yeah.
woo!
There's so much stigma about leasing cars too, where people will tell you like you're throwing money away as soon as you drive off the lot. You've thrown money away and this and that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know what? Money's meant to be thrown. That's how I feel about it. You just choose where you
Yep.
throw it. That's the thing. And everybody has their things. And for me, I just want a new car every couple of years. That's just the truth. And you can get,
It feels
honestly,
good.
so much more car for a lease payment than you can for to buy the same car. My car payment would be much higher. So honestly, it's fine.
I'm
I'm
excited
gonna
for
keep
you.
doing it.
I think that's
Yeah.
really exciting.
I keep like looking at what's in stock at like kind of the dealerships in my area to see before I even go there, so that I like have an idea. But I haven't driven a Passport ever, so I will have to drive it, but I'm sure I will like
Are
it.
you
It's
going
an
to go this
SUV. It's gonna be.
weekend? Because I feel like there
I
should be
want
deals,
to,
right?
yeah, I really want to try. So we're recording this obviously because Kirsten
Oh,
was
right.
talking about the holiday
Okay.
weekend. Yeah, we're recording this right before Memorial Day weekend. And so, yeah, there's a lot of sales going on. It's funny because also we're going to buy a new living room set. And that
Now's the
also, it
time.
seems like this is the time, but then I'm like, can I do both in one weekend? It sounds
I
exhausting.
know.
So I
But
don't know.
then you have to think about like how much money you really end up saving. If you were to spend it later, you would actually be spending more money. But 4th of July, I don't know. You could probably wait till 4th of July.
That's a good point. That could make me feel a little bit
I
better
love a
about,
deal.
yeah. Yeah, I know. I love a
Love a
deal
deal.
too, and that's how they get you. But maybe because it's a 3-day weekend, it gives you that extra day. But I'm also like, is it going to be so busy? I don't
No,
know.
I don't know. So I got my car on MLK Day, and
Okay.
there was not a soul at the dealership. No
Oh,
one.
you
It
made their
only took
day.
it took an hour total. I was just like, this is ridiculous. I should do this every time.
By
I
the
don't
time
know.
this airs, I will definitely be driving a new car. I don't know if
Yay!
I will have a new living room set yet, but I hope so, because once we made the decision, all right, we're gonna do it, because we've always, like you were saying about cars, we've always done like thrifted furniture, or like somebody else is buying new furniture, but their furniture is in
Right.
perfectly good condition. So we like inherit from friends and family. Like we're always
Me
taking
too.
that. And part of
Yeah.
that was having 3 kids at home, and 2 of them were teenage boys. Honestly,
They'll mess it
there's no
up.
point in having nice things. They're going to just destroy it. But now they're not here, and we've never bought like a matching cohesive new set of living room furniture. So once we made the decision we're going to do it, I hate our living room.
Yep.
And hopefully by the time
I
this
get
airs,
it.
we'll have both.
Next year is my 10-year anniversary of being in this house, and I was
Mm.
like, that's when we're treating ourselves to a new couch for the living room. I was like, that's gotta be, because like I can't, I don't have kids, but I have a giant puppy. She's not even a year and she's almost 80 pounds,
Oh my god.
and she's gonna keep growing, and 2 cats, and they're all just like gross and ripping things up. Like I can't vacuum enough. So I'm like, I deserve a new couch that's not
Yeah, you
shredded
do.
to bits.
Yeah, I'm excited for you about that too. But so I hope you have a really fantastic holiday weekend. And
You too.
thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. And to you listening, thank you so much for hanging out with us this week and hopefully every week. And we'll see you next week.